right, good afternoon. It's 4:01 p.m. it says here on Wednesday the 5th of August. My name is Councillor Darren Sanders. I'm the Cabinet Member for Housing and Tackling Homelessness. Before I start with this meeting, there's just a few housekeeping things I have to read out. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not use the lifts. There's apparently an installation in Guildhall Square, which I have to say was news to me when I was walking over, so I assume there's no installation. So basically, Queen Victoria statue. We all have to assemble by. In order to comply with the fire marshal regulations of the Guildhall Trust, whose building we're using, anyone who signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. Now, I've got to draw people's attention to the fact that this meeting is live streamed. You can also watch it on catch-up, if you wish, through the council website. Everyone speaking via a microphone will be on camera. That's currently me. And that will include people making deputations, and I will come back to that in a second. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly they do not wish to be recorded. We have 3 members of the public as well as someone making a deputation, so if you want to put your camera up, you can, but you just got to make sure that the person you're videoing is okay with it. Okay? Please can everyone use the microphones, and please note that you do not need to keep your finger on the button when speaking. Please remember to switch them off when they are finished. So I will now start, if that's okay, by introducing everybody, starting on my left with the person we call Alison.
Alison Harper, Local Democracy Officer.
Okay, then I shall move to the back row. Hello, back row.
Tanya Foscari, Group Accountant for Housing Neighbourhood Services.
Sally, could you just move into the microphone a bit more, please?
Sorry. Sally Scattergood, Assistant Director for Housing Management for Portsmouth Homes.
I'm Danny Ardrey. I'm the Head of Sheltered Housing and Support Services for Portsmouth Homes.
Thank you. And the person in the lovely white polo shirt at the back there.
Good afternoon. My name is Arin Saeed. I'm a resident in one of the blocks affected by this proposal, and I'll be given a deputation very soon.
We'll come back to that in a second once we've done the introductions. Then into the middle row, please. My right, so yes, you first, please. Thank you very much.
Resident Consortium.
Mandy Buxey, Resident Consortium.
And then the middle row in the middle.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Mark Fitch, Head of Decants for Portsmouth Homes.
Adam Hardwick, Assistant Director of Buildings.
Amy Holmes, Head of Compliance.
It's Phil Bentley, Head of Neighbourhood Services.
Jo Bennett, Assistant Director, Housing Need and Supply.
Shane Galvin, Head of Housing Needs, Advice and Support.
And then finally in the front row, probably the two most important people in the room. Yes, please. Yeah, someone's already nodding in there, Sam, so you go first.
Brilliant. Sam Coupland, Councillor for Charles Dickens Ward. Thank you.
Thanks.
Mary Varley, Councillor for Cosham and Mooring.
Okay, thanks very much, all of you. So we have 2 deputations, one of which is here, as Mr. Saeed has just put forwards, and one of which is from someone called Nicola Masters as well. Nicola can't be here today, but after discussing with Alison, her deputation will be read out by Alison, if that's okay, if that's all right with you. So that's just to be open and transparent, because the idea is to include all views where possible. Moving on, I have apologies for absence from the Director of Housing, James Hill. My understanding is that Jo Bennett will then say the words that James would normally say in these circumstances, and that her colleague Shane Galvin will deal with any issues that emerge with regards to things like housing supply and all that stuff as we go along. Is that okay? All right then. So now, just as the next bit is declaration of members' interests. Do Mary, Sam, or me have anything interesting to declare that's relevant to this meeting?
No declarations from us.
No. Mary is shaking her head, and I don't have anything either. Item 3 is an omission on the forward plan. Now, I'm going to get the website up just to see exactly where this is. I believe this relates to item 4, and it was omitted to the forward plan. The chair of the City Council Scrutiny Management Panel, who happens to be here because it's Mary, has been notified and a public notice published. So it is recommended that the omission is noted and that publication of the omission notice is noted. Mary, in your capacity as chairing the Scrutiny Management Panel, were you told?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's good news. We want to try and make sure relevant people are informed and try and not do this as often as possible. So that all relates to item 4, which is described as the large panel system blocks asset management. So what I will do with this is that I will ask the relevant... Hello, Sam.
Hello. Sorry, could I just jump in for item 3?
Right.
If that's okay.
Yes.
Yep.
I mean, we've gone past item 3.
I know. I tried to...
And so, yes.
Yep, it's just a question. So I assume that the plan was the section of the LPS blocks was omitted from the forward plan due to sensitivity, I assume. Is that correct? And is this the normal route that we take?
The answer I'm getting from the officer call who would have liaised with it is, the answer is yes and no. Okay. So there's the answer to your 2 questions.
Brilliant.
Yes, it is due to sensitivity. Also because there have been, obviously, as you might have seen in the news, various things have occurred within the last week as well. And the key thing is to make sure that residents are informed first, particularly any residents who may be affected, rather than, with all due respect to you, Mary and me, politicians, who frankly are less important than local residents. If anybody wishes to disagree with that concept, feel free to tell me. But frankly, I think residents who are affected by what is a significant decision, regardless of what happens, are more important.
Yep, that's
and
great.
If everybody can disagree with me if they wish. But that's basically the rationale. Is that all right, Sam?
Yep, I was just
all right?
bringing attention to
Is that all right? I know that there are many people who are process junkies within this organisation, but the residents are more important. Is that all right?
Very much, thank you. Just bring it to light, the decisions around that.
That's fine.
Thank you.
And then the answer to your question is no. So what I will do with this item, thank you for that, Sam, by the way, is that I will ask the relevant officer team to present the report that's in front of me. I will then ask Mr. Saeed to give his presentation orally. I will then also ask Alison to read out the deputation from Nicola Masters, and then I will then ask that if officers have any specific issues that relate to any issues that are raised, that they do that before I go on to the Residents' Consortium and the politicians. Okay? So, officers, please, the report. Adam.
Thank you. So this is a decision report in relation to 4 large panel system construction blocks flats, namely Tipton House, Edgbaston House, Barker's House and Nickleby House. A number of recommendations are outlined in section 2. However, in summary, they ask that the Cabinet member notes the building safety, financial, resident impact, budgets and support packages set out in the report, approves a planned and phased permanent decant of the residents of all 4 blocks, agrees that once all residents have been rehoused, the blocks will be taken out of use and deconstructed, and then delegates authority to the Director of Housing, Neighbourhood and Building Services to incur expenditure associated with the decant and deconstruction, and also to proceed with undertaking an initial development appraisal of the sites. In terms of background, following the introduction of the Building Safety Act 2022, all landlords of blocks flats taller than 18 metres in height have been required to undertake extensive inspection and investigations of those buildings to inform the preparation of building safety cases required by the Act. Portsmouth Homes currently have 22 blocks that are within the scope of this Act, and for many of those buildings, resultant remediation works are progressing within our building safety remediation programme that was approved in March 2026. 5 of the 22 blocks are constructed using a large panel system construction method that was popular in the 1960s, and due to the nature of this construction, they are subject to enhanced structure investigations. You'll note within the report that the 5th LPS block, Wilmcote House, has previously undergone substantial refurbishment and structure improvement works that was completed in 2019, and at the moment this currently remains a long-term viable asset requiring only fire safety improvements, so it's therefore not subject to this decision. The 4 remaining LPS blocks have had specialist external investigations undertaken, and there's been further review of that work by additional consultants as well. Whilst the investigations found no evidence of immediate structural instability, they do note that they are safe for occupation with controls put in place. They do require significant strengthening works to meet modern expectations alongside general fire safety improvements. A detailed strengthening solution has been developed, and that's been independently reviewed as well. However, the works required would be extremely intrusive, and due to the scale of disruption, it would mean that each of the blocks would have to be fully decanted for a minimum period of 2 years to facilitate the works. Alongside the technical assessment, we've also undertaken a detailed financial appraisal, and that was informed by budget costings prepared by our capital projects team and also 2 independent consultants with an estimated cost per block of up to £35 million. Due to the nature of the large panel system construction, the appraisal assumed a maximum certain future life of 20 years following remediation. And then when you play in the borrowing and repayment costs alongside anticipated rental income over that period, the cumulative deficit across all 4 blocks is estimated to between 143 million and 155 million. There is also uncertainty regarding future legislative change. So we know that there is the introduction of the minimum energy efficiency standards from 2030, and there's also revised decent home standards coming in 2035. So this has potential to further increase costs and would have to be accounted for. Therefore, from a financial and asset management perspective, undertaking the works is not considered to provide long-term value for money. In terms of the decant process, resident safety remains our priority and primary concern. And we've had independent reviews from specialist consultants that again have concluded that the blocks can be continue to be occupied and supported through to the end of 2030, whilst a phased and permanent decant is undertaken alongside our additional mitigation measures and some additional ones to provide increased assurance. The measures that we need to undertake generally include enhancements of existing practices, such as increased block inspections, ongoing engagement with residents and support where needed, as well as some planned maintenance works together with the phased decant of residents from the buildings. In terms of resident engagement and support, we informed the residents of all 4 blocks on Monday the 27th of July of the potential for a phased and permanent decant of the blocks subject to the decision today. The key principle of the engagement was to ensure that we gave the respect due to residents with them hearing the news from us first, and this was undertaken via face-to-face discussion to inform them, allay any initial concerns and answer any immediate questions that they might have had. We retained members of our decant team within each block for the remainder of that week, and we've been able to engage with almost all residents impacted in person. Subject to the decision today, we would then look to undertake a series of tenancy update visits to residents, where we would have detailed conversations with them around their individual circumstances and their housing need. Residents would have named contacts, access to rehousing advice and support, and we would support them with any moving arrangements and including homeless payments and disturbance allowances where applicable. And we would also give particular attention to any residents with disabilities, health conditions, care responsibilities or other vulnerabilities to make sure they're supported as well as they can be. We'll continue the engagement over the full duration of the decant period until all residents are rehoused. In terms of the rehousing and decant programme, the programme affects 544 homes across the 4 blocks, and it must be delivered in partnership with the council's statutory housing authority function. Rehousing will be undertaken in accordance with the City Council's housing allocations policy, ensuring transparency and fairness, both for affected residents and those already on the register. We will work with residents to identify their housing need and ensure that a suitable offer is made. The initial focus of the DCAMP will be targeted on the upper floors of the blocks, with the aim to complete this in early 2027, with subsequent decants being undertaken through to the end of 2030. Also within the report, whilst the recommendation is obviously a difficult decision, it does represent a potential future opportunity for estate renewal. Both sites have the potential to support redevelopment, and therefore there is a recommendation to seek authority to progress with initial feasibility study work to look at development options alongside engaging with Homes England around potential funding towards any future schemes. So in summary, we recognise this is a significant decision affecting 544 homes and many residents. Therefore, the proposed approach has been developed following extensive technical investigation, financial appraisal and consideration of the impact on residents, with extensive resident support being put in place before moving forward with these recommendations.
Okay, thank you for that, Adam. Irene, if I can call you Irene, I can take that liberty. Please give your deputation, and thank you for coming.
Councillors, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for giving me the privilege of addressing you today, and good afternoon. My name is Aaron Saeed, and I stand before you not as a housing expert, an architect or a politician, but simply as a resident of Edgbaston House, a building that has shaped almost every chapter of my life. In August 2008, when I was just 1 year old, my mother and my father carried me through the doors of Edgbaston House. I have never known another home since then. Every memory I possess was created in that block. It's where I took my first steps as a child. It's where I celebrated birthdays. It's where I revised for my GCSEs and A-levels. It's where I received my university offer to study politics and philosophy at the University of Southampton. It is where I learned that no matter how difficult life becomes, there is always one place where you belong. For my family, that place has always been Edgbaston House. My mother is a single parent who has devoted her life to raising my younger brother and me. We did not grow up with wealth or privilege. We grew up understanding sacrifice. There were times when life was uncertain. There were times when no money was scarce. There were times when the future seemed frightening. But for every challenge, there was one consistency: home. My younger brother is about to begin Year 8 at Arc Charter Academy, which is only a 2-minute walk from our block. Like me, he has never known another place to call home. Every morning, he leaves Edgbaston House for school, and every afternoon, he returns knowing exactly where he belongs, as my parents fled war zone in Iran. Every important decision my family has ever made has happened within those walls. It is where my mother worked out how she would provide for us. It is where we comforted one another as a community during uncertain moments. It is where we celebrated our happiest moments. To us, it is 20 years of life. It is our history. It is our identity. And it is our home. After the terrible tragedy of Grenfell Tower, this country rightfully transformed the way it's thought process about high-rise housing. Every resident deserves absolute confidence that their home is safe. That should never be compromised. But your own reports conclude that Edgbaston House is safe. That's why today's discussion is not about structural engineering. It is about something greater. It is about what kind of city Portsmouth wishes to be. Do we measure progress only by the buildings we replace? Or do we measure it by the communities we continue to preserve for generations to come? For almost 60 years, since 1966, Edgbaston House has stood proudly over Portsmouth. Its brutalist architecture may not be fashionable, and I have, said that many times. Its concrete may not be beautiful to everyone. I know my mother has judged it many times. But architecture is more than appearance. Buildings become meaningful because of the lives lived inside of them. A widow whose neighbours have become her family. a young couple beginning their future together, a child discovering the world like I did 19 years ago in that block, an elderly resident who has spent decades caring for the people next door. Communities like these cannot be designed by architects. They are built slowly, patiently, through trust, kindness, and shared experience. The ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle once wrote that the whole world is greater than the sum of its parts. And I take a lot of inspiration from him. Edgbaston House proves his quote every day. It is not 136 separate flats, as for the other blocks. It is one community, one shared history, one living neighbourhood. Once that community is scattered, it cannot simply be rebuilt. And we have still seen that with Leamington and Horatio House, even with the new project that has come into place, that many families were displaced as a result of that, and the council didn't do their best to rehouse some of these individuals. I knew a friend who ended up having to go with the rent-to-buy scheme, a private scheme in order to buy their house, and they were on social need. You can replace walls, you can replace windows, you can even replace buildings and anything that's man-made, but you cannot rebuild decades of belonging. I fully recognise that maintaining ageing buildings presents genuine challenges, and I appreciate the financial challenges that do lie ahead. But difficult decisions deserve the greatest care. Before a community is broken apart, we must absolutely be certain that every reasonable alternative has been explored. Has refurbishment been fully in the works? Has an independent comparison been undertaken between refurbishment and redevelopment? Has equal importance been given to the human cost of displacement and the financial cost of maintaining the building? And above all else, have residents truly been given the meaningful voice in deciding the future of the place they call home, like myself? Why can't we vote on this proposal? Consultation is important, so is direct democracy. But participation as a community is stronger. If Edgbaston House has a future to decide, then let the people who have built their lives shape it. Give residents the opportunity to vote on the options before any irreversible decision is taken by those in higher up positions. That is not simply good consultation, this is good democracy. Councillor Sanders, and to everyone else in this chamber, one day this meeting will become another page in the council's archives. For you, perhaps, one decision among many. For us, it will become one of the defining moments of our lives. I know it certainly will be for me. The philosopher Simon Weil wrote that to be rooted is perhaps the most important and least recognized need of the human soul. And I proudly point towards that Portsmouth skyline and proudly say, this is where I grew up. That is where a future public servant, which is my aspirations, first dreamed of serving his community. That is where resilience was learned. That is where hope survived difficult times. Edgbaston House has stood proudly over Portsmouth for almost 6 decades. Allow it to continue standing. Allow its brutalist character to remain part of Portsmouth World War II plan. And I want to end off by saying, what has wisdom, the compassion, and the courage to preserve must be preserved. Thank you.
Irene, thank you very much for that. That's very kind of you. We'll come back to the officer comments on that, and I'm sure there will be things that will move, things that will be done as we go forward, but thank you. Alison, could you read out the deputation from Nicola Masters, please?
I'm writing to submit a formal objection and deputation regarding the proposed 4-year phased rehousing programme for 544 households across Tipton, Edgbaston, Barkis and Nickleby House. I'm registering this objection as a Portsmouth resident who has been trapped on the council's priority housing waiting list for years. I currently live in a severely overcrowded statutory crisis condition, 2-bedroom maisonette where 1 bedroom is shared with 4 young children. For years, Portsmouth City Council housing officers have repeatedly informed me that there are simply no larger local homes available to alleviate my family's severe overcrowding. Yet this Cabinet is now considering a proposal to inject over 544 existing households directly into the highest priority bands of the local housing stock over the next 4 years. I urge the Cabinet to block or heavily amend this proposal based on the following direct impacts to families like mine. Number 1, immediate gridlock of larger family homes. The 4 tower blocks consist of hundreds of social rented homes. Displacing these residents will entirely consume the council's already microscopic turnover of vacant housing. This effectively sentences families in emergency or severely overcrowded conditions to more years of waiting with zero hope of being housed. Number 2, failure of parallel allocation strategy. The Council's Cabinet report does not explicitly outline how it will balance the emergency rights of the 544 tower block residents with its existing legal statutory duties to families living in severe overcrowding. Number 3, demolition without immediate guaranteed replacement. Emptying these buildings before new social housing blocks are actively built in the city shrinks our local safety net. The Council must not approve this rehousing scheme until there is a legally binding guarantee that a matching or greater number of larger social rented family units are built first. My children are being forced to grow up, play and sleep in an environment that heavily restricts their development, while the Council prioritises moving residents out of structurally safe blocks to avoid future legislative updates. I request that the Cabinet defers the decision until a revised housing allocations impact assessment is published, explicitly protecting the bidding power of families currently suffering from severe overcrowding.
Alison, thank you very much. Officers, I want you to try and reply as much as you can to the 2 deputations. Firstly to Irene's, which essentially is around, forgive me, I have to say it's the first time I've had a TARDIS in these meetings. And I get the feeling some people definitely want a time machine to take them back. I have to say that was an impressive ringtone, I've got to say. Officers, Irene's comments, and forgive me for paraphrasing Irene, what was a very comprehensive presentation. Essentially, you're losing communities. Essentially, you're getting people out of their homes. Essentially, you're breaking up people's social bonds, part of the social structure and the social fabric that exists. And also, I think in policy terms, the aspect of were all alternatives really looked at? So responses to that, is that a reasonable summation? Forgive me, I can't quote Aristotle, but I can quote Wittgenstein if you really want. But is that a reasonable summation of your deputation, Irene? Yes?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll quote Wittgenstein later. Officers, your thoughts? Mark.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Yeah, and thank you, Irene. I think that was a really lovely, heartfelt deputation, really well read and received. I think we genuinely know, as your landlord, about the communities that we house. We know, having been in the blocks and been in those particular buildings last week, how much bond there is in the communities. And we've already spoken about how we will try and maintain that, how we can foster those communities in other locations. So we do hear it, we do understand it. I think we're in a very difficult position, and Adam will answer the questions about did we really explore the other avenues, but we definitely will do everything we can to support you, your families, or all of the families, and the communities themselves, because that is really important to us. As you say, it's not just bricks and mortar, it is more than your home, it is the communities. So we do hear it and we do understand.
Okay, right. Anything else?
Yeah, just to sort of give some further detail around sort of looking at the options, etc. I think firstly just to sort of state, we don't underestimate the impact, this decision potentially has on residents, and it's not one that we've, arrived at as a recommendation lightly. So as I sort of mentioned, and is contained within the report, we have undertaken extensive investigation into the buildings, and that's been led by external specialist structural engineers and fire safety consultants to understand, the sort of condition of the building. from that, they identified that we would need to undertake, works into the future to sort of, improve the stability of the building and strength of them. They then did various iterations of design proposals around how could they practically undertake, design and do those works. And we went through various iterations of design works, basically looking at, how can we do that to minimise disruption to residents. And I think in every option that they looked at, no matter what they did to try and minimise the impact, regardless of the decision today, if the works proceeded, all residents would have to be decanted from the buildings because the level of disruption would be so extensive that you couldn't reasonably expect residents to remain in the properties. We then appointed a further set of specialist consultants to then appraise the work of the first set. So this is, again, is a further independent check of, is their appraisal of the building, correct? And then in terms of design work, is that, a suitable solution, and do they agree with it? And basically the findings of, the second set of consultants confirmed the work of the first set was correct, and they agreed with that. And then in terms of actually, like, what does that remediation work look like in terms of cost? Initially, we costed that ourselves through our capital projects team. We obviously got to a high number. We appreciated that, the level of finances we're talking would have a significant impact. So again, that's why we've gone out and appointed 2 independent quantity surveying firms to then fully cost the proposals. And again, they've done that independently of each other, and they've both come back with, similar numbers in terms of the overall scheme. And then from that, we've then been able to use those figures then to inform financial appraisals. And I think, we have looked at all, multiple options of how could we potentially fund the works, how could we deliver the scheme. And I think in all options, due to the scale of what the deficit would be, it doesn't end up being sort of a viable proposition going forward. So, I think hopefully just to reassure, we have looked at all options available. And I think in terms of the other building safety programme, that sort of shows that, we want to retain our stock and improve our properties. Where we can, we will do that. But that with any building, there becomes a tipping point where it isn't a sort of value for money viable option long term. And unfortunately, with these blocks, that we are at that point where it's tipped into the sort of end of life category for the buildings.
Okay, thank you for that, both of you. Now, moving to Nicola's point, which is a point that officers know that I have raised previously, which is the impact on the waiting list. Shane.
Yeah, thanks. Maybe just to clarify first that I've spoken and speaking on behalf of the landlord function of the council, Ports of Homes, and I'm speaking from Housing Needs Advice and Support, the department that is responsible for the statutory functions under the Housing Act 1996, and by association overseeing the allocations policy, which manages how social housing is allocated. So all social housing allocations, as per the Act, need to be made in accordance with a published allocations policy. We do have such an allocations policy, and it does deal with situations such as this. It's 2.10 of the banded scheme, which allows for social housing tenants who need to move because their home is scheduled to be demolished, redeveloped, or subject to major works, will be awarded an urgent level of priority. I think, looking at the 3 questions posed, the first is really around, will there be an impact? And there will be an impact on the housing register. These households will be awarded an urgent level of priority, but allocations work in date order. So those that are already on the housing register with an urgent level of priority will not be overlooked as a result of this, but it will have an impact on people joining the register later or people with a lower level of priority. There will be more people on the housing register as a result of this. In terms of the second point, which is around how will these needs be balanced, and the answer really is via the allocation policy. The allocation policy dictates what priority certain situations should be awarded, and it's the allocation policy which dictates who will be awarded an urgent priority, a significant level of priority, or a recognised level of priority. But there will be an impact, and I think it's worth noting that there are certain groups within the allocations policy who are awarded additional level of priority within their band. That's Portsmouth care leavers and defined members of the armed forces community will still be awarded additional priority within the urgent band, so we'll certainly see less of an impact compared to other households. And I think the third point around the decision, I think, is probably what colleagues have already spoken to, but if there's any other clarification, I can provide.
Okay, forgive me, forgive me, colleagues. There are two questions that relate to that. Firstly is it the belief of the team that everybody who may be forced to leave these blocks over a 4-year period will be rehoused? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. The next question is that we have an allocations policy. Nicola's just referred to that. We're obviously not going to go into Nicola's case. That's a discussion between Nicola and everyone else, okay? But has the allocations policy increased the number of moves over the last 12 months?
Yes. So looking at the last full calendar year of data, so the policy which was introduced in November 2024 saw an increase in allocations of around 20% in that first year. So rising from 811 allocations to 975.
Okay, so is it your belief that what will happen in practice is that the impact will be on the increase that has occurred in allocations? In other words, we go back to a situation we were 12 months ago in terms of moves, as opposed to an actual reduction in allocations based on 12 months ago.
I don't mean to avoid the question, but I think there's so many confounding variables, it's difficult to predict the actual number, and I think what come before have been difficult to predict an actual number of allocations. I think the impact is twofold. It's from the increased number of people joining the register, and as a result, there are fewer properties in circulation to allocate to as well. But I wouldn't want to give a precise projection.
Okay, thank you for that, Shane. Okay, that ends the section with regards to the deputations. We may return to each of these as we go along. Residents Consortium colleagues, who wants to start?
Hi there. Right. How will the Portsmouth Homes ensure that all the affected residents are rehoused fairly and within the proposed timescales?
Yeah, I suppose I'll refer back to the allocations policy in terms of the fairness of how people be registered. They'll be registered according to their assessed need as per any other applicant to Portsmouth Housing Register.
Okay, thank you.
What measures will be taken to minimise the impact on the wider housing register and other residents waiting for housing?
Apologies if I repeat myself, but it will be around ensuring that applications are dealt with fairly and in accordance with the policy. But there will be an impact, and some people will wait longer for housing as a result of this.
I also live in one of the blocks affected, namely Nickleby. I'm part of the sheltered housing scheme. So will the residents of the sheltered side of the block be given priority, and how will we be kept informed of progress and the key milestones of the decamp programme?
Hello, it's probably best if I answer that. So I'm Danny, the head of sheltered housing. So the allocation policy isn't my area. That's housing needs and advice's area. But as you'll know, when you came to sheltered housing, we assess people specifically for sheltered housing, and they join the housing register the same as everybody else. The waiting list for sheltered housing is slightly different because it hasn't got all of the general needs properties in there. So Mark mentioned earlier about TUVs, that if this is agreed today, we'll do tenancy update visits with people, and part of that will be ensuring that we continue to establish the sheltered housing need that people might have, and if a person still needs sheltered housing and still wants sheltered housing, then that's the registration that they would have for rehousing into another sheltered housing property.
Does that answer your question, my love?
Sort of.
Well, then carry on.
Sort of. We've the council replacing the lost homes and increasing affordable housing. Will they be doing this on the sites of the 4 blocks that will be pulled down, basically, if it goes through?
Well?
Hiya. So as part of the work, we've looked at the sites that will be cleared from the demolition of the properties to understand what we could bring forward. We're at a really early stage in that, and in the report it explains what we've done so far. But our intention will always be to maximise our housing land for new supply and to ensure that we can increase our housing stock.
Does that answer your questions? If not, keep going.
I spent 2 hours last night going through this because obviously it affects me in the long run. How did the council decide? I know they're going to be, if it goes through, it's going to be from the top floors down, but why have Nickleby and Barkus only having 2 floors done to begin with, whereas Edgbaston has got 4 floors and Tipton are having 3 floors done? I would be interested to know what the reasoning is.
Mark and Adam.
So the number of the floors defined, that's advice from the structural engineers in terms of each block is slightly different in its sort of construction and condition. So they've basically suggested certain properties be decanted in different ones initially in each block. Ultimately, from a sort of builder's perspective, the decant will be top down. From a sort of housing allocations policy, that will be based on housing needs. So it won't necessarily go exactly in that order, but from a logistical sense as well, it makes sense that obviously when we go top down, we can then shut floors off, make sure they're secure, so that obviously stops any sort of antisocial behaviour or any other issues occurring as well, and then gradually we can work through the building.
Well, you should have said in that first place, shouldn't you? We're all open and honest around here. There's no such things as stupid questions. Right, Residents Consortium, do you have anything else on this particular topic?
I've only got one. I remember when everybody was moved out of Horatio House, obviously different circumstances, but to make it safe for the residents that were still waiting to be housed, and also to stop people breaking into empty properties and sitters' rights, etc. They did put security in there, and I'm just wondering if that's something that you'll be doing this time to secure your properties that are empty, basically, without people claiming sitters' rights, etc.
Yes, so the security on Horatio Leamington was around a waiting watch, and that was about sort of fire safety management and mitigation. So the need for that wasn't about sort of squatters or anything. It was about managing the sort of risk in the building, because it was a very different situation to where we are today. So in terms of the 4 blocks affected, we aren't proposing to do anything like that because it's not necessary. But when, like I said, as we clear a floor, we would then secure, obviously, like the escape stairs, so people can't go up above that level. We would change the lift settings so the lift can't go higher, and then we would obviously make sure that every property is secured and remove like meters, etc. So it sort of will avoid that situation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Does that deal with everything from yourselves? Yeah? Okay, thank you. I'll go to the political spokespeople. I'll start with Mary.
You're going to tell these good folk what's going on. How often are you going to do that, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mary. And it was a point that Val made earlier on, I think, that I probably should have answered then. We will continue to update residents on a very regular basis. So we've got a website page for each of the 4 blocks individually. There are frequently asked questions that will be on those websites and will be updated on a regular basis as well. So when we get new questions, we'll provide the responses and then put them on the website so everyone can see them. We'll do individual newsletters to the blocks. As you're aware, we've got a dedicated housing officer for each one of the blocks. They will spend at least 1 day a week in the community rooms or in the shelter scheme manager's office, so that they'll be in the communities at least once a week anyway. And we will update residents because it's going to be a very long period of time. It's going to be a very unsettling period of time, and we want to ensure that we provide the appropriate support throughout the whole programme.
Second question. You talked about how detrimental this will be to friends who've lived together for 20 years, and you're going to do your best to make sure that carries on. I want to know how you're going to do that, because that's really hard.
Yeah, I agree. It is really hard, but I think we've got a really good basis and knowledge of the communities that we've got existing in those 4 buildings particularly. We've got community rooms in each of the 4 buildings. We've got particular members of residents that run those community buildings and know who the communities are, the people that use them, what they're used for. And what we'll try and do is foster that community into the other buildings that we're moving people into, and what's around locally as well. So we've got 18 other tower blocks within the city. We've got lots of other communities in the city, and we'll just try and keep those community feelings going wherever the people are ending up living. But I agree, it's going to be a really difficult thing to do.
Any further questions or comments, Mary?
Comment. Can I just encourage residents to ask for what you need, you know, because they will do their best, but if you don't ask and you don't say, you won't get, okay? Do your best to say what you need.
Oh, hang on, we've got the 14th floor here. Hang on. Come on.
I actually run bingo nights in our community room, so I'm a key holder for our community room, and believe me, Nickleby is not backward in coming forward in asking the council for things.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I want to come back to that when it is my turn. Okay? Because I have my own principles as well, unbelievably, in all of this, which I'll elucidate after Sam. Sam.
Brilliant, thank you. First of all, thank you, Irene, I think, for a, again, heartfelt and well-spoken deputation. It really, was a great way that you said, can we quantify the value of belonging? And I think in all these, sums that we're playing to try and make sure we do the best, sometimes it's hard to quantify that. Thank you for raising that. I'm uniquely positioned in the fact that I'm a ward councillor for Charles Dickens, where 2 of these blocks are, and I had the opportunity to speak to some of the residents there, and I also got an opportunity to speak to some of the decant team, which I really want to thank you for placing them there. I believe our housing team have approached this situation with a thorough and thought out and compassionate approach at every opportunity, and taking experience from the previous, Leamington and Horatio House's decants. I just want to champion them for putting in the extra time. Specifically, I had a conversation with Nicola from maybe the estates team, or she was in one of the team. She was incredible. She personally knew some of the situations that were going on with some of the residents, and she quoted them to me, and then I was able to communicate and relay that information, as in connect with those people that she mentioned. And I think that's amazing that we have a team that's willing to go into these houses, into these families, into these community and really connect with them. I wanted to just say that I have recognised the fact that face-to-face talks have been amazing, and out of the 544 households affected, the last update was that there was still 22 contacts left to have a face-to-face communication. Is that still the correct number, and have you got plans to make contact with them?
Thanks, Sam. The number has gone down. I think we're down to about 15 from all 4 blocks that we've not physically spoken to. Some are on holiday, so we've got return dates for the people that we've not yet spoken to, and we are working with the area housing offices in terms of contact for those tenants where we've had no contact whatsoever. So the number is coming down, but we are at the blocks again tomorrow.
That's great. That's really great. Thank you. And I just want to say also that the residents have majoritively understood the reasons, and I think that's down to the face-to-face. So I want to champion that and encourage that face-to-face communication and the letters, the newsletters. Thank you, Mary, for asking about that. A short question on one resident that wanted me to raise something was he moved from Horatio House. So he's had 2 years, I think, or how long that period was in this, and now he's decanting again. And I just want to maybe ask a question, have you got a sensitivity around that and understanding that they're going to be moving again?
Again, yeah, thank you. I think we are definitely aware of the people that we've already moved out of Horatio and Leamington and where they are now currently. So we were aware before we did this piece of work which people were in one of these 4 buildings and have, as you say, have spoken to those and understood their situation.
Thank you, thank you. And just finally, there's the 2 points I'd like to finally ask. Majority of residents just want to know the timings. At what point is the first timescale, announcement in terms of the first lot of floors being moved?
So in terms of, obviously depending on today, the decision from today, we're proposing to carry out the first set of tenancy update visits for the top 4 floors of all 4 buildings from the 10th of August. And so we'll complete all of those, and then we'll talk to the housing needs team about how they are then registered. And then and as the decant team, we'll gradually go down the building 4 floors at a time to carry out the rest of the TUVs. But we are doing specific people if we know there are particular issues, vulnerabilities or things where we need to do the TUV earlier. Yeah. But we will plan to do it on 4-floor basis, starting with the top 4 floors and then going down the building. We do appreciate it's the uncertainty that causes the most amount of anxiety and not know when you're going to move, where you're going to move to, and which is why we need to keep up the communication on a regular basis to make sure we do that properly.
Brilliant. So actually, I'd like to just raise one more little thing off the back of that. It was running through my mind as we were talking about the amount of houses available, as moving. I just want to ask a question to the room. What plans for new buildings, as in being built in Portsmouth, that might be able to help deal with this?
Hi. So we've continuing to build. So we've recently refurbished our Wecock housing office. We're coming to the end of the build at Bunting Gardens, and we've got a build in Twyford Avenue coming forward. We also have an active acquisition plan, as well as the development of Summers Orchard moving forward and other developments by other RPs. So we have a pipeline of properties coming forward, and part of the work that we did in partnership with the landlord about the scale of the moves was to think about the housing delivery coming forward and how we could least impact the register but most take advantage of new properties coming forward.
Brilliant.
And I would say, Sam, that both the leader of the council and I have been in conversations with various housing associations to see when their developments are coming on stream. And to see if we can accelerate those.
That's great.
To try and make sure not just for the people who may be forced to leave these flats, but also for the issues around the housing register that Nicola rightly outlined earlier. So just to say that we're moving as many stones as we can to try and speed things up, because people want to know. People need that certainty. Is that all right?
Thank you, Darren. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Sanders. That's really great to know that you're putting your voice out for those things.
That's
yeah.
right. and you can call me any name you like. Everyone else does.
I haven't got a nickname for you yet, but you know. Just one last thing,
of course,
unless you want to.
No.
Interject.
It's your section, so
great.
feel free.
Just finally on Nicola Masters' deputation, I too had a conversation with a situation of overcrowding, where two teenagers were sharing, of opposite sex, were sharing the same room. And so as they have already approached housing options and on the register, there's conversations about them being of accessing the register in two places or being on the register in 2 times. Now, I didn't push for clarity at the time, but could I push for clarity here today?
Yeah, there would be a single registration, essentially, but if somebody is already in the urgent band, they wouldn't lose that waiting time. That'd be an addition. And if they were in a band lower than the urgent band, this would be an increase to that priority, so the priority waiting time would start there at any event, in any situation like that.
That's great. Just to really hone in, they will still, if they are provided equal, like as in a similar building with a similar overcrowding situation, would they still be on the register for that 3-bedroom that they might need?
So I think when we talked about this when we briefed, it's really difficult to make any unilateral statements before we fully understood the circumstances of all of the residents in the block. Our intention at this point is to ensure that people are able to live in the home that they need. But at this point, I don't understand how many people in that accommodation would need adapted property or might need much larger family homes. And so at the moment, our intention is to do exactly as Shane suggested, and we would register people for the home they need and attempt to meet that within the timescales. We need to be really realistic about what we can achieve, and we've written into the report an annual update, and we're endeavouring at the next annual update to be very clear about what we'll be able to achieve and to ensure that if we do have to in any way change our expectation of this, that we can update on it then. But right now we don't have enough information to make any hard and fast rules, but we will always endeavour to meet everything that everyone needs.
Thank you. Yeah. That's good.
Thanks for that, Sam, and thanks for everyone. When it comes to a decision like this, and this isn't the only one on this agenda, by the way, that has significant impact and real potential problems for people's lives, it's a case about having principles. And forgive me, I never quote philosophers in this room until now. So mine are based around 3 things. The first, Irene may recognise from Aristotle, which is to separate out the essential from the accidental. The essential here, so say for instance with one issue is if someone wants to move, the essential thing is to tell them the truth. The accidental aspect of it will be that they may not like what they hear. I think Sam and Mary and myself have had a fair few of those over the years. But separate out the essential from the accidental. The second comes from a guy called Michel Foucault, which is to talk around the archaeology, find out the real cause of the problem and see what you can deal with it, rather than just look at things superficially. And the final bit comes from a form of linguistic philosophy, which I like, called hermeneutics, which is basically talk to the people who are most affected. Get the opinions out of them first, because they're the ones telling the truth, just as you've spoken your truth. And that's why it was very good last week to go into all 4 blocks and actually listen to people's opinions. And my comments and my judgments are based on those 3 things. So I'll start with the essential. The essential is the situation that we're in, which is that the block is coming to its end of its natural life. In fact, these 4 blocks, bless, are coming to the end of their natural life. You've said they've been up for 60 years. They shouldn't have been, but they have been. And that's really tough, I have to say. Really, really difficult. That's the essential thing. So what do you do from there? The archaeology of it is that there are significant improvements in building safety regulations, which everybody, and particularly Sam, I'm delighted for that, welcomed. But there are accidental things which are real world consequences of that. But that is the real truth, and that is the cause of the issue that affects pretty much everything this council's going to do over the next 2 years, or until Labour decides to get rid of it, bless, in March 2028. And then the final bit is to hear what people think. And as I said, I will come back to all three as I go along. And the first is to thank both you, Irene, and Nicola for your deputations today. I told Irene when he emailed me I wanted his points to be included in the discussion. I hope they have been. And I think several of the issues you raise I will come back to, sometimes obliquely and tangentially, but I will. Because the points you raise highlight the difficulty and the pain of decisions like this. Telling someone they have to leave their home is awful. I know. I've had to do it. I've had to do it to my mother, who lived in Horatio House. Telling her she had to leave, she did stop crying after 15 minutes because it was her home. It was her place. She talked to me about spending Christmas in there. And I was like, you're never spending Christmas in here, love. And that's really hard and really difficult. So in taking those decisions on those three sets of principles, to ignore the human consequences of everything is absolutely stupid. And that is not something I will do. And having been through this, frankly, 8 years ago, in a very personal set of circumstances, I really never wanted to do it again. Because I know the pain, I know the human impact, I know the breaking of the social bonds, I know the impact on the housing register. But we're here again, because we've got 4 blocks, as I've said, that are approaching the end of their natural life at a time when building standards are thankfully more stringent than they were before. And the work to bring them up to these standards, the essential stuff that needs to happen, is clear. But it presents Portsmouth Homes with a dilemma. I have in front of me 3 lousy choices, to be honest. Choice 1, the work could be done with everybody, with you, Irene, and everyone else, and your mum, living in the flats. Now, I will tell you now that, as the report states, your lives would be hell on earth every day. Because they would be. And frankly, all of you would be in your rights to sue Portsmouth Homes if we did that, for ruining your lives. However, daily hell on earth for residents, for the people with the social bonds, is something I reject. The next option is to do the work without people living in the flats. Now, as I understand it, and the report outlines, that means moving people out relatively quickly, certainly faster than 4 years, and keeping them out of their homes for 2 years. All the points Irene raised around social bonds, social cohesion and community cohesion, they're gone under that, at least for 2 years. And when I was in the blocks last week, I heard a fair number of people across all 4 say many, many of the things that Irene said this afternoon. I also know how many people value community activities, not just the bingo in Nickleby, I have to say, but also I was particularly impressed by the stuff run by Andre and my old friend Maria in Tipton, Edgbaston and Ladywood. I have to say, come back to you later. Now, the advice I have is that by getting people out for 2 years and repairing all the jobs, not permanent, but getting people out for 2 years, and for many people that's going to feel permanent, will mean the blocks last for a limited time, which means whoever sits here, in whatever council may emerge, faces the same decision and a real chance that people leave their home not once but twice, as people have done in both Leamington and Horatio houses. I have to say, for those people who are old enough to remember when Solihull House, people had got out of Solihull House way back when, they to them were taken back, and then they found they had to leave Horatio House, which is what the building was done. So this is not the first rodeo for this. The third lousy choice is to move people out over 4 years, take the building down and work to put in place a development that will last for decades to come. I have to say, on that basis, in terms of social cohesion, whereby you either it breaks now or it breaks later, that is the least worst option. Now, the other thing, coming back to hermeneutics and about actually understanding what people actually said, is although there are many, many people like Irene and his family who want to stay, there are many people who wanted to move. I have to say the news isn't here, but the news article reflected the stuff that I heard last week. There are plenty of people across all blocks who said, when can we go? Can I get out now? And I have to say, many also criticised the nature of the blocks they were living in, whether it was drug dealing in the bin chutes or bed bugs in the flats. Those people, if you had a vote, those people will want to go. Now I know that any decision is taken with an impact on the waiting list, which Nicola and, as I said, I have raised during this process. I would say to Nicola that by phasing this project over 4 years, rather than getting everyone out fast, the impact on the waiting list that Nicola rightly raises will be minimised, because at the very least, a quantum of the sort of homes she wants built will be there. And that's clear from both deputations and from what I've heard, that the option of basically phasing everything over 4 years, bringing down the blocks and then replacing them, will leave people distraught. As I said, none of the options are good. Each of them will upset someone. And I think that the least worst option is to progress the decant and decommission of the blocks with people leaving over a 4-year period. However, I want some things prioritised. 1, negotiations with Homes England on how they can fund what comes next start now. Well, not quite 7 minutes past 5 on a Wednesday afternoon, but as soon as possible. And I want to focus on building council homes Portsmouth people can afford. I'm delighted that the Prime Minister wants more council homes. It's about damn time. And I want him to deliver that promise here, now, this city, this site. These sites cannot spend years being empty. That is in the report. If you look at the bar charts, it's in the report, and I want to make sure that happens. Second, as with Summers Orchard, I want local people to lead in shaping that future. Irene's point around social cohesion is really important, not just in terms of what comes now, but also in terms of what comes forwards. And as those people who've been involved with the Summers Orchard project know, that gave people the one thing that is missing in these circumstances, which is hope. And finally, I want Portsmouth Homes to take all available options to ensure that the activities that residents run, that you run, Val, that Andre and Maria run over in South Somers Town, as I have to call it, can continue. Alison, can we add that final point to the recommendations, please? And I've got it in writing, just in case you need it, all those processes with all that. So I want to thank everyone who's spoken with the team about this. I echo Sam's point about the professionalism that people have gone about these things. Unfortunately, this is not the first rodeo. I hope it's the last, but I doubt it. But I hope we can put in place something that will last for decades or longer to come. And that is the only way that we can give people who will face real pain some hope for the future. Okay? Right, that's step 1. So thank you very much for everybody who's taken part. Irene, you don't have to stay if you don't want to, but feel free to do so if you wish. And for our members of the public who are here, you can stay as well if you want. It's only going to get more fun from here, I tell you. So, next item on the agenda is high-rise blocks, refuse disposal arrangements, as I call them, bin chutes. So who wishes to start? Phil.
Thank you. So I'll go straight into it. The report that you've just introduced concerns refuse chute systems in a number of Portsmouth Homes high-rise blocks. The report seeks approval for a phased programme of bin chute closures in these mentioned high-rise blocks, and it sets out why this action is now required in relation to the bin chute systems. The need for action is driven primarily by fire risk assessment findings, and closure is recommended because the bin chutes are no longer considered fit for purpose, and closure removes the chute-related fire safety issues. It avoids impractical retrofitting and ongoing maintenance costs, and it supports wider improvements in waste management, recycling compliance and resident safety. The recommendations of the report are that yourself, Councillor Sanders, notes the fire risk assessment findings and the need to take action in relation to the existing bin chute systems. We're asking for the approval for the proposal with a phased closure of bin chutes in the high-rise blocks listed within the report. The agreements that the resident engagement approach listed outlined in section 6, and a request for a future information report once the phased closure programme has been completed. The background is that we've got in Portsmouth Homes 22 high-rise blocks, many of which were built when bin chute systems were designed for waste disposal needs of the time. In respect to high-rise buildings, chutes have already been closed in Grafton Street, Estella Road and Grosvenor House, and the remaining high-rise systems are dated. They create significant issues with misuse, blockages and cleaning demands. And as I've mentioned, the fire risk assessments have identified that the existing chute arrangements do not provide sufficient containment in the event of a fire, and it creates risk of fire and smoke spread. So as a result, Portsmouth Homes must either invest in a significant retrofit programme to retain the systems or remove the risk by closing the chutes through a managed programme. So just a bit of information around fire safety and building safety. We, Portsmouth Homes, recognise responsibilities under the Social Housing Act and the wider building and fire safety frameworks, including the Building Safety Act, where it's applicable to this. Fire risk assessments have identified the bin chutes as a persistent fire risk due to the accumulation of waste and inappropriate disposal of large items, potential for ignition and spread of fire from within those enclosed chute rooms. The current interim mitigation includes regular checks of chute hoppers, communal fire doors, together with continued repairs and maintenance of the existing chutes, and these controls would remain in place until each chute is safely closed. The fire risk assessments identify that action is required if the existing chute systems are to remain in use. The two responses are to retrofit or to retain the chutes with additional safety measures, or to close them through a phased programme. We have consulted with Hampshire and the Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service regarding the proposed closures, and they do recognise the potential benefits of that proposal, and Portsmouth Homes will continue to liaise with them throughout the proposed changes for each block. In relation to waste management and environmental considerations, the Environment Act 2021 mandates consistent recycling collections across local authorities. The existing chute systems were designed and built in the 50s and 60s when recycling was not part of the household waste collection and residents produced less waste than they do today. The chutes are suitable only for small bags of general waste. We already see residents take recycling and food waste to the external bin stores separately. Future changes will require further separation of waste streams, and the existing chute systems do not support the separate waste streams. In relation to the maintenance and the operational impacts, during 2024 and 2025, Portsmouth Homes recorded 569 chute-related incidents across the 17 high-rise blocks, and there was a total cost of £97,105.04 to maintain those. Neighbourhood services estimate approximately 64 working days each year, or in a region of £10,000 are spent unblocking chutes, and that was just in 3 blocks that we commenced that analysis. Cleaning demands associated with chutes are high. This includes cleaning the chute hoppers, removing accumulated waste, including black bags that are too large to fit down the chute and therefore left in the chute rooms. And the neighbourhood wardens already report that a high proportion of residents transport waste directly to the external bin stores for both general waste and recycling. So the reason why we're saying that retention is not recommended is because if they were to be retained, works would be required to address the fire safety issues, and that would include specialist fire detection and alarm systems. The capital cost of these upgrade works is estimated at £50,000 per block. We think that equates to a total cost of more than £1 million across the high-rise stock for this task. In addition to the initial investment, there will be ongoing requirement to inspect, service and repair these systems. In comparison, the one-off closure costs are estimated at approximately £10,000 per building, with a total project cost of around about £180,000. The implementation plan, it's suggested that there's a phased approach. The order of closures would be determined through the HRA bin project stakeholder group and the capital projects team, taking into account links to other fire safety works, maintenance, costs, incident levels and readiness of residents in the blocks. The programme will be delivered through an engagement-led approach, with each block considered individually before any chute is closed, and the existing mitigation measures would remain in place until chute closures were completed. In regards to resident engagement and assisted collections, resident engagement is a key part of the proposed approach. Residents will be provided with information explaining what is changing, why the change is needed and what would happen. The engagement process will provide opportunities for residents to raise concerns about access to the bin stores, lighting, security, cleanliness and similar issues. The assisted collection process will be actively promoted before each closure, and residents who may find it difficult to take waste to the external bin store will be identified, and that will include residents with mobility issues, disabilities and other relevant circumstances, and they'll be able to request support. And the phased approach will also allow learning from each closure to be incorporated into the subsequent phases. There is an integrated impact assessment associated to this, and it does identify potential impacts for residents with protected characteristics. The report does suggest that these impacts will be mitigated through inclusive communication and the engagement process that I've talked about, as well as promotion of the assisted collections for residents who require it. And finally, there are legal and financial implications, of course, and the report identifies a range of those relevant legislations. And the report concludes that the proposal supports the Council's approach to resident safety, fire risk management and waste and recycling compliance. And that's the end.
Okay, thank you for that, Phil. Residents Consortium, any questions or comments, please?
Yeah, what lessons have been learned from the councils that have already completed similar chute close programmes?
Thanks, Greg. They've been incorporated within. It was heavily focused on resident engagement, communicating the issue and the vision, and bringing residents along on that journey and not getting ahead of themselves. They made sure that each block was finished before they moved on to the next. And actually, I've been to some of those buildings and I've spoke to council officers in those other councils to make sure that I've taken on that learning to kind of expedite the implementation in this proposal.
Thank you.
Hiya. How will Portsmouth Homes monitor the impact of the bin chute closures on cleanliness, fly tipping and recycling rates?
Thanks, Mandy. I think the recycling rates could be challenging just because of the way that recycling is collected. So it'd be more about how the building is presenting and the issues we might notice in a localised manner rather than things like tonnage overall. So it'll be how is it presenting, how many pulls for service are we getting, how much time are we having to spend sorting or tidying those areas. But it should be quite visual and quite obvious.
Thank you.
Hello, Phil. What support is going to be available for residents who have got mobility issues and can't access the bin stores? I myself have trouble moving around, so at the moment my scheme manager, if I've got anything that needs to be taken down, she will take it down for me.
Yeah, good question, Val. The assisted collection is about understanding the needs of individual tenants and putting in place basically what you've just described. It will be a member of my service probably, where they'll come out on a set day and they'll physically take it to the bins, basically. That's the easiest way of describing it. There'll be a bit more in terms of the process and the review periods and things like that, making sure that that is still the right thing into the future, but it is an assisted collection process that is available to everyone if they need that support.
Yeah, also, just because I know you're a sheltered tenant and you've mentioned the scheme managers and the sheltered housing teams are helping, we will continue to offer that sort of service to you. We're never always going to be able to do every single one, but the sheltered team, they visit blocks, they visit residents, they'll always pick up that as well, in addition to field services, and we'll also work to make sure that we understand if there's any other services that we can help signpost or refer to or engage with that might help meet people's needs, because if you've generally got somebody who's got a mobility need putting rubbish out, in the majority of cases there might be other needs that other agencies could be able to meet in addition to us as Portsmouth Homes helping that tenant as well.
Yeah, okay, yeah, thank you, Danny. Yeah, Sam does, I must admit, does go beyond and be Call of Duty sometimes, but she always asks when she gives me my call twice a week. She always asks me if I need anything taken down.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, the only other thing I was wondering, as regards of the bin sheds themselves, how is it going to be checked on a regular basis to make sure it's safe for people to go and put their rubbish in there? Only because even in my bin shed, sometimes people dump stuff and it's just not safe to go in there.
In these buildings, they'll definitely be checked daily and cleaned. There is a reporting process if there's something that hasn't been seen or missed that needs to be followed up on, and that's quite responsive. And you know, we would basically be keeping an eye on them all the time. They need that. What they look like, though, into the future, they are to be designed per building, you know, with that understanding of the requirements of the bins and how many and, you know, where they'll be stored and so on. That's not determined at this stage.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else? No? Okay, sorry, I didn't explain what exactly is going on here for the people who are new here. So the Residents' Consortium is a body that of council residents that is used to help consult on the policies that go through. So it's basically the residents' voice. In terms of policy and decision making, they're involved with a great deal of the policies that we do, and I have a distinct habit of just listening to them and doing what they want. Not always, but they're very, very important because the resident has to be at the heart of everything. Mary and Sam are political representatives here, so they're representing their respective political parties, but we try and work in a reasonably collaborative manner. This is not a committee, it's a committee of one person who's me. But I think it's important we get as many voices, as many views as possible, because I'm old-fashioned. I think that makes for better policy. So that's just to explain how all this works. All right? Thank you very much. Sam.
Brilliant, thank you. Your plans for assisted delivery, assisted disposal. How longevity is that? A longevity project that's going to be ongoing in terms of your workflow, and is that going to be like encapsulated cost-wise into your team?
The answer is it's reasonably new to us, but as we're introducing new disposal methods, we have introduced assisted collections as we've recognised that's something that is needed. The process is that there's if you like, a qualification, so we need to check what is needed, and then there will become an annual review of that. It doesn't mean that they have to prove it over and over. It's just to check that it's still required. For example, perhaps someone else lives there with them or something like that, or it's a temporary need. And it will be it's planned for sustained sort of longevity. In terms, did you ask me about costs, or how would we look?
Oh yeah, is that going to be incorporated into your team?
So I think the answer is yes. It is. It will be incorporated into the team's day-to-day work.
That's good. Thank you very much. Following a conversation with a resident, again, I think I mentioned this in prior meetings that a resident might be thinking they're losing services by this being taken away, even though studies show that they may not be using it all the time, and obviously with the new recycling coming into place. So in the response of that resident, would they be gaining anything, maybe a discount off their ground rent or like their service charge? And what kind of balance to this, losing this potentially?
Well, it's twofold. Primarily, it's about safety of the building and for the residents, and that's a key aspect to the proposal. The other aspect, so I think the bit you're talking about is the bit that they're losing is the ability to put something into a chute and it end up in a bin. Well, the requirements of the legislation I mentioned is about the presentation of that waste in the right way, and so really it's about a movement with the times to present in the right way. So there'll be new bins, different types of bins for different recycling streams, and it's really important that they're used in the right way for lots of reasons, not just the environmental aspects. And so they're not losing anything in that respect. They're gaining the ability to recycle and do the right thing. So I don't know that they're necessarily losing something. They're just gaining a safer building and the right facilities to recycle.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you've been commenting about the safety aspect of this, and also I'm really glad that you've said that it's a real priority to engage with residents and take them on that journey. Thank you.
Can I just come in as well, just to add, in terms of what residents might gain, I mean, as Phil's already outlined in the report, is that there are costs involved in the way that we manage the refuse chutes currently in terms of repairs, cleaning, and the constant pull to deal with issues in those buildings. So the hope is that with a more sort of streamlined refuse system that's working once it's up and running, that some of that pull will be reduced, and therefore costs, which ultimately tenants do pay for, should start to come down.
Thank you.
Okay, was that it, Sam? Thank you. Mary?
All good from me. Pleased to hear, and not that I didn't expect it, that people with mobility issues will get help. That's the main thing.
Thank you for that. I have to say this is something which I changed my mind as I spoke to more residents. I mean, I originally thought that closing bin chutes was a really bad idea, I have to say. But to be told of drug dealing, rough sleeping, vandalism, or what people politely described as sexual activity going on in these chute rooms is not on. The idea that adults or children should be exposed to that is unacceptable, in my view. And these join the fire risks that are outlined in the report. I was also swayed, I have to say, by the learning from Sheffield and Hounslow, which is in the report. Hounslow's population is a bit bigger than ours, just under 300,000, so it's particularly comparable. Now, the other thing is that everyone has a tale of their rubbish getting stuck in a chute or being unable to send their rubbish down because someone else got their rubbish stuck in a chute. So spending £110,000 a year on that, when that cash could be spent on making those blocks look better or putting in kitchens or bathrooms, seems a waste of money to me. And as the legal comments on the report state, that's going to be even harder in future as recycling laws change and councils will get punished for not meeting them. I have to say also that the comments of Hampshire Fire Service weigh heavily in my decision going forwards. It seems really that the alternative to what is being proposed is to spend a lot of money doing the shoots up, only for people to carry on shooting up drugs or worse. I reject that approach. But endorsing this paper, I do want to add one caveat, and it feeds back into what people have said previously. Because as we've discussed, there'll be a lot of people who are going to find it difficult to get down the stairs to the bins. They're also going to get personalised visits, tenancy update visits as we go along. And I want the team to work with each of these tenants who are affected, whether it's through the sheltered housing aspect Danny outlined earlier, or through other people, on a personalised assisted collection plan, so that they can have confidence that their rubbish and recycling can be put in the right place at the right time. And I think that will relieve a lot of the potential issues that we've discussed as we've put in this. Alison, can we add that as a sort of a final point to the recommendations, please? Luckily, I have that in writing as well. But on that basis, thank you, Phil, for that, and I think the policy is agreed, and I certainly at some stage want to see how the phased plan works, and also people's reactions going forwards to it as well. We want to try and make sure that this works as much as possible. Oh, and if we can spend some of the savings on the blocks affected, that would be lovely. But on that basis, the policy is agreed, and thank you very much indeed. So I now move forward to the third item on the agenda, which is high-rise blocks, fire risk assessments, underground parking areas. Who's going to do this then? Amy, thank you very much.
Thank you. So the report is for the high-rise blocks, fire risk assessments, underground parking areas, and the purpose is to seek approval to close the underground parking areas at 4 Portsmouth Homes high-rise blocks of flats. The proposal responds to the fire risk assessment actions and is supported by an options appraisal which shows that keeping the areas open would require significant investment and ongoing maintenance that is not financially viable. The report relates to the underground parking areas at Estella Road, Grafton Street, Westminster Place and Wingfield Street. The recommendations, as detailed in section 2 of the report, are the following. Notes the case for change and approves the closure of the underground parking areas in the 4 blocks. Approves the principle to phase the closure of the parking areas, including ending commercial lettings. Approves the implementation plan and the communication plan. Requests an information-only update once the closures are complete, and requests the Director of Housing, Neighbourhood and Building Services to commission a feasibility study on the conversion of the space for residential purposes. Just a bit on background, within the 4 buildings there are underground parking areas, and these areas were originally intended for parking but are now also used for storage and in some cases commercial letting. In some locations, additional boarding or structures have been added, which has changed the nature of these spaces and increased the complexity of managing the fire risk in these areas. There is a mixture of tenants, including let to tenants within the block, let to tenants outside of the buildings, and also commercial lets. Whilst they are parking spaces, and that's what they were designed for, the majority of spaces are now being used for storage areas. Portsmouth Homes has responsibilities and obligations under the Social Housing Regulation Act and the Building Safety Act and the Fire Safety Act to ensure that fire safety and building safety is managed appropriately. Fire risk assessments are undertaken on the blocks of flats. These identified actions to improve the fire safety of the parking and commercial areas if they are to remain in use. We engaged an external fire engineer to advise on the measures that would be required, and that included sprinkler systems, mechanical ventilation, ongoing inspections, servicing and maintenance, and continued management of stored items and the use of spaces. Retrofitting the underground areas would require significant capital investment, as well as ongoing inspection, servicing, maintenance and management costs. Closure of the parking areas would remove the need to install and maintain sprinklers and mechanical ventilation, as the fire risk would be removed. The recommendation balances resident impact, fire safety and financial sustainability. We have also received confirmation from Hampshire Isle Wight Fire and Rescue Service regarding the closure, and they recognise the potential benefits of the proposal, and we will continue liaising them throughout the changes and keep them involved. For the business case, a review of the options was undertaken, including retaining, changing the use or closing the area. The costs associated with the options were reviewed over a 30-year period and are included within the report. All options to keep the areas open in some form are considered commercially unviable over that 30-year period. For Grafton and Estella, retrofitting costs would result in losses ranging from 1.6 million to 3.8 million over 30 years, whereas closure would cost up to 160,000. For Westminster and Wingfield, retrofitting option would result in a loss of over £1 million over 30 years. Therefore, closure is the most financial sustainable option, as it removes the fire risk associated with the current use of the areas and avoids disproportionate capital and ongoing revenue costs. We recognise that the proposal will affect residents, leaseholders and commercial users who currently use the spaces for parking, storage and commercial, and therefore there's an implementation plan identified in the report. This impact recognises and the implementation will be managed through a phased approach, allowing engagement and operational planning. Current mitigation will remain in place until the parking areas have been closed, and that includes regular checks, management of stored items and continued repairs and maintenance as needed within the areas. Regarding resident engagement, Engagement with residents and users is important for the successful delivery of the proposal. In terms of engagement, we will use direct communication with affected residents, leaseholders and commercial users, supported by clear written information and opportunities to raise questions. We will work with those affected residents and users to understand their individual circumstances, and they'll be given clear information and opportunities to raise questions. Within the report, it details the future engagement activities, which includes the items already mentioned, directly contacting affected residents, leasehold and commercials, users, provide opportunities for questions and individual discussions where residents or users are concerned about the impact on them, and we will use consistent messaging that explains the FRA actions, the fire safety rationale and the financial reasons for the decision in plain language. An integrated impact assessment has been undertaken and has identified potential impacts, but this will be mitigated through early and accessible communication with individual tenants. Any questions?
Residents Consortium. Friends. Oh my God, they got a list. Excellent. I'm going to get coffee now, I tell you. All right, fire away.
Right. What options are Portsmouth Homes going to make available for residents who currently rely on the spaces for parking or for storage?
Yeah, hi. So I think as Amy outlined in the report, we will need to do that on an individual basis. So in terms of the implementation, we will work with all of those who currently hold one of those spaces to understand what they're using it for, what they want to continue having, either storage or a parking space for, and then work with them to identify an alternative space. There isn't one blanket approach that I think I can describe. It will, be different for individuals. I think we recognise that whilst a lot of people are storing stuff in there, they're not necessarily things that they might want to continue storing, for instance, so their storage requirements might decrease. Where it's parking for an actual vehicle, then we'll work with them, particularly where it's around a mobility need, to try and find somewhere that's as near as possible to their home, so that we're not disrupting their coming and going from their home as little as possible, really. But it will be based on an individual approach.
Okay, thank you very much. Because in that particular area around Grafton Street, Wingfield Street, etc., there is not a lot of parking, so it could place a strain, especially people who have got mobility vehicles who actually need the parking.
Yeah, we recognise that, and to try and mitigate that, we have been holding the letting of certain spaces that we manage in terms of parking and garages in the vicinity, so that we're trying to build up some vacant spaces so that we can start to offer those out. We can't guarantee, obviously, that they're going to be as near as those spaces are, but we'll certainly do our best to mitigate the impact on residents as much as we possibly can.
Any other questions, resident consortium colleagues?
Yeah, I think you did mention a timeline. I didn't catch it if you did. So what's the timeline? How long are we looking at until they are going to be up for residents?
Within the report, we have put a programme that will ideally be completed within 6 months, but that's subject to, obviously, conversations with residents and users.
Right, and the other thing that concerns me about that is obviously the infestation of vermin, rats, etc. Have you got anything in place for that?
So I'm not sure if you're aware, but we've already, in those areas, we've been doing some really focused work with various colleagues in pest control and across our estates team and community services to reduce infestations where they've appeared, and we've had a good deal of success in terms of the management of pests. But you're right, there will always be, some remaining element. I think that one of the contributing factors to those infestations is the amount of items that are stored in some of these spaces, because they make very nice homes for, rodents particularly. So I think the hope is that whilst we might see, a bit of a peak during the clearance of any of these spaces and the closing down, that ultimately it should help with a reduction of infestation.
Thank you. And also I would imagine being right opposite the ports there would be another one.
Yes, you're right. That is one of the contributing factors.
Thank you.
Anything else? Oh, they've done rehearsals here. Take your time. Please put your microphone on, Greg.
How will Portsmouth Homes manage security and prevent antisocial behaviour once these areas are closed?
So the intention will be, Greg, that they will be, literally the access will be blocked. So there shouldn't be access allowed. Access isn't likely to be easy to get into any of those spaces. But as with all of our communal spaces, Phil's team and our housing teams will continue to manage and monitor all of those spaces to make sure that if in the event anything did happen, we'd be on that and address it as quickly as possible.
Okay, anything else? No? Mary?
These areas have been under contention for a long time. I'm wondering, have you got any thoughts about what you're going to use the space for after?
Yeah, hi Mary, it's Sally. The intention isn't to use the space, because to use the space for anything really would require the refurbishment in terms of, that Amy's described in terms of the investment needed into that. So any use of that building would require some sort of investment to make it more fire safe. So the intention is not to use that space.
Crack on, Mary. I've got all evening, madam, so, feel free.
Just that we live in such a densely populated island. The fact that we're not going to use space is a bit unusual, that's all. But I'll take your word for it.
Anything else, Mary? Nope. Sam?
Nothing from myself, thank you.
You're all fine with this, yes? You're all fine with it. Thank you very much for that. Right. Firstly, my turn. Firstly, I want to thank those people who've got in touch with me about this. I know my phone number's been plastered on Facebook, on cars, some of which, irony of ironies, are clearly abandoned, and the garage gates in Grafton and Estella. Now, I don't respond to campaigns like that, so apologies if you've rung me to no avail. I do want to raise some of the questions people did put to me before making some comments. The first one is actually a question I did want to raise anyway, but I'll do a politer version of what people have said to me. Flats in these garages. There's no rationale in the paper. No rationale has been explained for this, but a feasibility study is one of the recommendations. How realistic is that, particularly given what Sally has just said, and why is it an option?
It's an option because it was proposed to us as a potential to make use of the space. As Mary's just said, it is unusual to have an empty space. And so it was proposed as a possibility to carry out a feasibility study. As it says, we haven't done that work, so I don't know how feasible it is, and we would be able to feed back afterwards. But yeah, it was added as a request following the unusual nature of having an empty space.
I will come back to that. Steve asked if these, a version of what the resident team was asking. Steve asked if these garages are closed, how are they going to be safe?
So, As Sally previously mentioned, we will be securing them, and Phil's team and the housing teams will continue to inspect them to ensure that they remain safe.
Okay. David raised issues, again, as been raised earlier, around residents, particularly with mobility scooters and the disabled. How are these mobility scooters going to be stored? Bear in mind we have specific storage for mobility scooters in some of our blocks.
So, as Sally said, it's really important that we deal with each customer on an individual basis, and we won't know what's going to work for them for fire safety in that building until we've talked to them. So Sally's team will be carrying out that work and ensuring that solutions are fire safe and also meet the needs of the customers. If they can't find a solution, Sally's team will be linking to my team to ensure that we can meet the needs of that person through a registration on the housing register to make sure they can live in a property that has the facilities required by them.
Okay. Monica asked where the belongings people store would go.
So again, as Sally said, her teams will work on individual solutions and ensuring that, for example, where clearance might be needed or where an additional storage facility would be needed, that we support residents to discuss the options with them, and to make sure that we're listening to those customers and working with them in a way that we haven't ruled out anything specifically because we don't know what the individual asks will be. So we'll be looking for personalised solutions.
Okay. Lucy asked, where will people park if the garages are closed? Linda asked specifically about future parking for people with disabilities.
So the teams have halted the lettings on local parking assets at the moment in order to be able to do that reprovision work. And as Amy said when she talked about the timescale, we're aiming for 6 months, but we will be working to ensure that we can reprovide for people. And again, in terms of people with disabilities, we will need to understand what's possible within the area, and we will need to understand whether or not people are living in the right homes to be able to meet their needs.
The final question from me that people have given to me comes from the newly elected councillor for Nelson that covers Grafton and Estella, Steve Andrews. He wishes to know if things like sprinklers and mechanical ventilation, do they apply to garages that are purely used as garages, or is the main reason for it because there's lots of storage in there?
This is generally due because it's a block of flats above it, so there's obviously residential accommodation above the underground parking, which increases the risk.
Okay, I'll pass that back to Steve, but he may be in touch as we go along. So thank you very much for those answers. So my thoughts are based on those questions and also visit to all the garage sites I did today. Thanks also to those in Grafton and Estella who I spoke to. Some things on my visit I expected to see: cars, motorbikes, bicycles and mobility scooters. However, more than a few of the cars in Grafton and Estella looked abandoned, with dust, cobwebs and even rust. Some weren't parked in cages, but on the access and egress roads in each of the blocks. I also saw things I did not expect: paint pots, tiles, shopping trolleys, loft insulation, leather chairs, tennis rackets, plastic bags, a skeleton, plastic thankfully, carpets, mattresses, wardrobes, cardboard boxes and even a doll's house. I also didn't expect to see so many empty garages, but that may be down to some policy decisions that have just been explained. And then there was what people told me, the problems that they told me about. People parking outside their block to use the ferry and leaving their car for months on end. People from outside the city, including the Isle of Wight, that especially got them going, using the garages. Bemusement, I think that's the politest way of describing it, that the garages would, not could, would be turned into flats. And then there are other issues, particularly in Grafton and Estella, around that are not related to this, but did inform people's general views of things, particularly around the scaffolding that appeared to be outside their blocks for months on end. Now, people have complained to me for years that the garages don't work, especially when the rain ruins their belongings. There's also the leaks as well. So the idea that somehow these garages are absolutely superb, beautiful and pristine is wrong. I now have Hampshire Fire Service mentioning, as has been outlined by the team, the benefits of closing these cages, these garages. And as with so much nowadays, I can't ignore that. And I've sensed from both Sam and Mary that they agree with me. You can tell me no, this is an open and honest environment. So in reaching my decision, based on what I saw, I have 3 key principles. Firstly, I don't care about the car dealer. I don't care about people who come from the Isle of Wight and other places that people mentioned and who do not live there. If you want to come from the other side of the city to do it, lovely. However, the most important thing that we have to look for in making this policy isn't you, it's the tenants and the leaseholders of the blocks who are affected who use these garages. Within that, those who use it for parking, not just cars, but bicycles, motorbikes, and especially mobility scooters. I want an assurance that for them, they will get a re-provided parking space within the housing estate, ideally as close to where they live as possible. And if that means telling someone who lives far away from Buckland that they can't have a parking space, so be it. Is that a reasonable thing to ask for officers?
The request is reasonable. The capacity to meet it isn't necessarily. So the reprovision of space for a bicycle or a motorbike might not be possible. We will aim to deal with the parking needs of the residents there and to understand what they need in its locality to the block. But the ask is reasonable and we will make best endeavours to ensure that we meet people's needs. Likewise with mobility scooters, we will need to consider the suitability of reprovision and whether or not the person's living in the right place for us to be able to do what we need to do. But in general principle, yes, we will try and replace people's parking.
And I have already started to help that. Because after my visit, people were particularly concerned about in Grafton and Stella about the road in front of them, which is where all the parked cars that appear to go to France all the time occur. So now, I don't quite know who owns that land, but as part of contingency planning, I've already asked the council's non-housing parking manager to work with the housing team to tackle that problem. Because I think if that can happen, that will reduce the pressure closing the garages in Grafton and Estella will cause. It'll also get rid of the abandoned vehicles, I have to say, which I think will also help in terms of engendering some trust going forwards. I also, as was indicated earlier, a personalised plan, please, for people with mobility scooters in particular. And also people who use their garages for storage. I'm not quite sure what we can do with the paint or the plastic skeleton or the cardboard boxes, but the truth is that there will no doubt be lots of things that are really, really important. These social bonds that Irene talked about when we started this, some of them are in there, and some of them will be in there, and they will matter. So I want to make sure that there's a plan to help people deal with that and to make sure that we can actually help them keep what they've got. But in a way that doesn't mean that we have to spend huge amounts of money and actually do something the fire service doesn't want to do. Finally, I am being very polite, deeply sceptical of turning these into flats. I've not seen any rationale. It's not in the report. And frankly, Sally's views, which was it is not our intention to reuse them, does not exactly assure me about the feasibility study that is put forward as a recommendation. On that basis, I want that recommendation removed, please, Alison, and replaced with one around re-providing or using all best endeavours to re-provide parking spaces for those tenants of the blocks, the relevant blocks who currently use their garage for vehicles. If someone does come up with rationale for flats, I'd be interested to see it, but it's not in the paper, and so I don't think we can commission a feasibility study on somewhere where there are frequent leaks, unless I see one. I'm sure it's in there somewhere, but it's just not in the report. Finally, I note the savings that are being put forwards from this, and I would like to see some of that money to go on improving on the environment of these blocks. Phil has sent reports here previously talking about peeling paint in Grafton and Estella, and I want to see endeavours done to put some of the cash saved from this closure back into improving other bits of the blocks, and I think again that will go some way to help engender the trust of those affected. And so on that basis, and particularly as a result of the fire services opinion which has now come to me, I support the rest of the report, and except for one small thing, which is I don't think we have an update when it's all complete I think we should, at the very least, the housing spokespeople should get an update at regular intervals, because we want to see exactly how this is going to work, what's possible, what's feasible, what frankly won't fly, and then we can all discuss together the best way forwards. So with again, that's in writing, Alison, just to make sure it's all easy. But with that, I support the rest of the report. And so we move now to the final item on the agenda. I realise we've been going 1 hour and 55 minutes. If anybody wants a break, put up your hands. If you don't, I'll plough on. Right, okay, I'll plough on then, thank you very much. The fire safety report. Amy.
Thank you. So I'm presenting the decision report for the updated Portsmouth Homes fire safety policy, and the recommendations are detailed in section 2, are to seek approval of the policy with immediate implementation, and that the updated policy is published on the PCC website and promoted to residents. For background, the fire safety policy has been through many iterations and was previously approved in September 2024 with the implementation from 1st of October 2024, with the policy setting out how Portsmouth Homes effectively manages fire safety to our dwellings to keep residents safe and meet our legal responsibilities. As with all our policies, they are subject to regular review to ensure that they are accurate and respond to relevant changes. In regard to update of the policy, it includes a number of changes that consist of the wording has been updated to be specific to Portsmouth Homes rather than Portsmouth City Council Local Authority Housing. The format of the policy has been updated to be consistent with the layout of Portsmouth Homes policies. The wording and language has been updated to make it easier to read and understand for residents. Additional sections have been added, including definitions, contractor competence and governance arrangements. We have updated the section around fire risk assessments to provide clarity on how and when fire risk assessments are undertaken, who is responsible for undertaking them, and how residents can access fire safety information. We've clarified that FRAs are applicable to buildings with 2 or more dwellings. Previously, this was just where there was a communal area. Changed assessment from the PAS 79 form to the British Standard 9702. Clarity around timings of FRAs moving from 2 years or 1 year for a higher risk building rather than undertaking FRA reviews, and with clarity on residents on how they can access the FRAs. The resident responsibilities section has been updated, and whilst the general responsibilities haven't changed, we've provided clarity to make it clearer as to what we expect from them with regards to fire safety, with the key points being related to keeping the communal areas clear, providing access to properties for fire safety checks, and to let us know if they have any concerns with their ability to evacuate a building. In regards to consultation, we consulted with residents through our resident policy focus group, and the policy was shared on our Portsmouth Homes consultation webpage. Feedback was received from residents and leaseholders who generally confirmed that the policy was clear, and minor changes were made as a result of the feedback, including clarification around battery markings and communication with residents where a block is subject to a stay put policy. Consultation was undertaken with Portsmouth Homes Fire Safety Panel with senior representatives from across the Directorate, and the policy was also consulted with Hampshire Isle of Wight Fire Rescue Service, who confirmed they support and are in agreement with the policy. In regards to implementation, it is proposed that the policy is implemented immediately. However, it should be noted that changes to the timescales and application of FRAs will be introduced on a phased basis, as existing FRAs are due for renewal or review. The new FRA will be undertaken on the revised form with the new expiry date set as per the policy. As part of the deferment, it was requested that we undertook benchmarking against other providers, and that has now been undertaken. So we've benchmarked our approach to fire safety and management of communal areas, and Appendix C provides details of 55 registered providers who have adopted a zero tolerance or similar approach to management of communal areas. Within the list, there is a range of both housing associations and local authority registered providers of both similar scale to Portsmouth Homes, as well as providers with significantly higher numbers of stock. The fire safety policy has been in place since April 2024, at which point the zero tolerance approach was adopted. At the time this was developed, it gained support from Hampshire Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service, and the current update to the policy does not in any way change the extent or application of the existing zero tolerance approach, but provides clarification due to requests from resident consultation. We have received support from Hampshire, and the need for the zero tolerance approach is to act on FRA actions raised by qualified third-party fire risk assessors to ensure that Portsmouth Homes is meeting its legal duties in response to managing fire safety and ensuring resident safety. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Amy. Residents Consortium colleagues, any comments or questions? I know you've been through this before, so thank you very much for your input, but any further questions or comments?
Hello. Yeah, how will Portsmouth Homes make sure that residents are aware of the key changes in the updated fire safety policy?
So we regularly put any updated policies or new policies onto the Portsmouth Homes website, and we also advertise them within the magazine House Talk, which identifies obviously any new changes and what they are.
Okay, thank you. I get about the website and House Talk. I've been involved with, as we all have, so you know we know as that is. Would you consider, bearing in mind the amount of people that are now on social media, possibly put some information from yourselves on there for people?
Yeah, we can implement that.
That's lovely, thank you.
Yeah. How will the compliance with the policy be monitored, and how will you report it to the residents? Will it be through House Talk, on social media, etc.?
So we use like dashboards to monitor performance in relation to fire safety, in particular fire risk assessments. That is monitored obviously on a daily basis and then reported at different points, including fire safety panel, which is internally, and we also report updates to Councillor Sanders. We bring updates to the resident consortium regarding different compliance activities, which also includes fire safety, and we include any compliance to the policy in the annual report, which is issued as part of House Talk on an annual basis.
What additional fire safety training, guidance or information will be provided for residents?
So in terms of guidance for residents, as Amy said, we will sort of launch the updated policy in various comms, but also we will rely on our neighbourhood team as and when they speak to residents about anything in the communal spaces or anything to do with this policy. They will also support spreading that kind of communication and updating residents and advising about any changes they might need to make to the way that they're using their communal spaces. So that's how we'll do that. And we'll just, I think, in terms of, whilst we're launching it, and we'll do some comms around that, I think it's important that we also revisit those comms at various points. So it's not a once and done thing, I think. We will look to use, as you suggested, social media at various points, not just on this policy, but on various other of our building safety messages that we give out. Adam.
Yeah, we find one of the main questions we're continually asked, why can't we do this? Why can't we have that? And we tell them why, because, it's a fire risk if you can't get out of the building. But I think it needs to be a stronger, more definite, rules that they have to follow, because they all sort of think that it's just done to annoy them. And, and if it's there in black and white and it's explained to them, I think we'll get a better response.
Just to add to Sally, really, we obviously have information posters and documents displayed within the communal areas of blocks, and within our higher rise buildings we send them additional information as part of building safety packs each year, which conveys information about specific fire risk. We also we are considering producing sort of more visual guides that could be given to residents to help them understand sort of fire risks and how to sort of manage the buildings. And like Amy said, we regularly do articles within House Talk to not only sort of remind residents of responsibilities, but also sort of try and increase the sort of knowledge and understanding of why we need to do certain things. So I think there's multiple layers to how we can do communication and sort of various media forms that we can use to try and get that message across and try and work with residents around understanding, really.
Idea of visual. A lot of people, I mean, in the block I'm in, many of them don't even speak English. So something that's visual, at least, will give them a start into it. And it's a little bit easier for them to realise what we're talking about. Because some of them seem, to them, they seem strange. You know, that they can't have a child's toy downstairs left out. It's things like that that need to be posted so that they know why. Not just you can't do it. It has to be you can't do it because. And I think that'll help everyone all round.
I was just going to add to that, Greg. We use our focus groups, and in the last one, we actually reviewed aspects of this policy in terms of how my services pass those messages to residents. There's a bit of work that's still in process, and that was about the wording that we use. Some of it was actually fed back as it was too officious, so we're trying to find a balance, but we are using the focus group to kind of refine that as well.
Anything else, colleagues?
Yeah, with the previous policy, and now obviously we've got the updated policy being looked at, how is that, do you think, going to make a big difference to the residents? I mean, as you're aware, when there was no doormats in the block, etc., there was an uproar, wasn't there? So how do you think that's going to be, you know, with the residents about now private balconies?
I think the key, as Amy talked about, she talked about the changes in the policy and what they're there for, and in real sense there's no change to that piece and the point that's been there before. What Amy was talking about was making it easy to understand, easy to read, etc., and minimal updates. So we've had a policy for a long time, it's not a new one. This is just about the new version with those updates in it. Sally, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, and I think just to sort of reiterate, in terms of Phil's team, they do an awful lot of work when, you know, residents do have something, whether it's a doormat or, you know, something else that they need to raise with them. They will have that conversation with them and explain why it's needed to move. So it's not just a move it. You know, they will explain, you know, give some of the background and explain why, and work with residents to try and support them to, you know, adapt the way that they're living in that communal space.
Yeah, that's great, thanks. And I do agree with Greg, maybe more visual for people that maybe English isn't their first language would be a good idea.
Yeah, that's certainly something we've been trying to adopt with lots of our policies. I think you've probably seen that we've gone down the route of having some videos and video clips. So we'll certainly try and adapt that for this one as much as we can too.
Lovely, thank you.
Hold that thought. This policy was deferred last time for reasons around trying to get further information, and that's now been put forwards. But as it was deferred, I'm going to do things slightly differently this time. So I will have my say first before going to Sam and Mary, and then I may do a couple of sentences summing up, but they may be long sentences, if that's all right with you. So the key thing, the archaeology of it all, is that fire safety matters. The days of putting saving money before people's lives are thankfully long gone. As with bin shoots, when the facts change, I change my mind. As I've said in a few meetings of this over the years, over the many years that housing associations cleared communal areas, this council didn't. My view was that putting up a painting or flowers in a communal hallway has always made a place a home. And that view is still held, I know, by many, many people. But, as I said, when the facts changed, I changed my mind. And it was only when the laws, regulations, and Hampshire's fire service said change it that change happened. The 2022 Fire Safety Act, backed by pretty much every political party now, was clear. Zero tolerance. That's easy to say, but it has a practical impact. But what it meant was that hallways, communal balconies and staircases are essential means of escape. Block them and people can't get out. I think that's accepted by everyone except a lunatic fringe as being a general opinion. But that act that people voted for actually went further, as has been indicated. It included people's private balconies. Now, this is more problematic. The balconies must not cause a fire, but they're not a communal escape route or can affect those routes in the way that even things like front doors can if you put the wrong nail in. Now, those balconies have been in our fire safety policy since October 2024, frankly. But as this paper seeks to clarify what that means in practice, I did something slightly different to the Residents' Consortium this time, in that I asked officers to come up with slightly different wording for the policy which recognises their unique place in the home. So forgive me whilst I read this out. I will circulate this to Mary and to Sam in a second. But the idea is to say that as far as private balconies are concerned, Portsmouth Homes recognises that private balconies form an important part of residents' homes and provide valuable outdoor space. Residents are encouraged to enjoy and make reasonable use of their balconies. However, their use must not create a fire risk, contribute to fire spread, compromise building safety, or place others at risk. So to reduce fire risks, barbecues, fire pits, patio heaters, and any appliance or equipment involving an open flame must not be used on balconies. Electrical appliances, solar panels, although why you want to use a solar panel on a balcony is beyond me, but some people will, and we've got to include it. Battery storage systems and similar equipment must not be installed, used, stored, or charged on balconies. Materials or substances or items that are explosive or act as an accelerant must not be stored, used, or kept on balconies. Balconies must not be enclosed, and installations that alter the open nature of the balcony are not permitted. Residents must not store, use, or attach items to balconies that are excessive in size, scale, or quantity, or which could create a significant fire hazard or significantly increase the fire load of the balcony. Where a fire risk assessment identifies fire loading, combustible storage, or other fire safety concerns relating to a balcony, residents will be required to take appropriate action to address the risk within the timescale specified by Portsmouth Homes. Balconies must be maintained in accordance with Portsmouth Homes guidance and kept free from conditions that could contribute to the ignition, development, or spread of fire. Portsmouth Homes will publish separate visual guidance, my emphasis, to assist residents and staff in understanding what is acceptable balcony use. Even relatively small amounts of combustible materials can contribute to fire growth and spread. Keeping balconies free from excessive fire loading helps protect residents, visitors, and neighbouring properties. Where Portsmouth Homes identifies a significant fire hazard or excessive fire loading on a balcony, residents may be required to remove the items concerned. It's a bit long, I know, but I think the key thing is to be a bit clearer about what does and doesn't work. And what does, but particularly focus on the significant fire spread. When I walk down the Eastern Road, I see plant pots, I see washing lines, bless us, I saw washing lines in Estella Road this morning. And there is a balance that needs to be struck in a way that just doesn't exist in communal areas. But my understanding from the officer call is that this does satisfy the Fire Safety Act of 2022, I believe. Oh, I'm getting nods over there. That's excellent. Thank you very much. If it didn't, then we'd be back at square one here. But actually does balance up the particular issues that people have with private balconies. Now, there's one other thing I just want to check, because frankly, this is the elephant in the room. This policy means, as I understand it, that this council has no problem in principle to hanging various things, including flags, on private balconies, provided they do not create a significant fire hazard or significantly increase the fire load of the balcony. Am I right?
Yes.
Good. I think that's pretty clear, because we need to balance things up. I will now, if I were to distribute this to Sam and Mary, please forgive me, this was another one that was done for today. But I will come back to what I want at the end of this, but I'm very interested in your comments. So I'll hand this out to Sam, and Sam can ask questions. Oh, no, actually, Mary can ask questions. Mary, my apologies. I will send over, when I leave this meeting, which will be in about 10 minutes, a large print version for you, okay? But I'm sensing, do you have any disagreement with the general principles of it? Okay, and Mary, my apologies for that. But Sam, any questions or comments on anything involving this item?
That's great, thank you. How could I follow all those great questions from the Residents Consortium and from your statement yourself? I'm glad, I'm grateful that common sense approach has been taken and we've been listened to as residents. I think the priority I wanted to say was that it's a good thing that we're trying to make this clear. And we bring clarity and working with residents, and I think that's all I needed to say. Actually, thank you.
Well, thank you for that, Mary. If you have anything to say, please say so.
Can I just clarify? Are fairy lights okay or not okay?
Now you're asking. Is this because there is a friend of yours who has fairy lights and is desperate to know that the fairy lights are still on, Mary? Hang on, it's like University Challenge at the back there. I tell you, it's fantastic. Everybody's trying to. No conferring.
As they are electrical, the answer is no.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, luckily I've done my stint. So, Residents Consortium, I apologise for going against what you wanted, but I think the balance and some of the issues that you've actually raised, particularly Greg raised, around the need for visual guidance and also around the fact that some people do need to have things explained more than once, means being a bit clearer, even if it's a bit longer, is worthwhile. So what I'm suggesting, Alison, is that the recommendations go ahead, but that what I've... No. Yes, of course you can. Sorry, I just thought you were going to say no. I mean, just like
You worried me then when you shouted no. I just want to be absolutely crystal clear, because you've shared the text, that relates to private balconies, not our communal spaces, and the approach to communal spaces remains as it has been, for very sensible reasons, and this is about the private balcony piece. And I just want to say it out loud just to be sure that we're all absolutely clear and that is understood.
It is understood by me.
Thank you.
And therefore it is understood, without wishing to sound too draconian about it all. Thank you very much. Thank you. So the idea, Alison, is that the recommendations will stand, but that the policy I've just outlined is just added as a final one. I think that is the way forwards. If I could, yes. If there is a way to do it so that it's put in the policy. I don't want to redo the policy, and I don't want to go back all over again, and I think that's the best way forwards, not least because we need to approve this evening, I understand. Is that right? Alison, is that all right? Excellent. All right. Well, colleagues, thank you for your patience for 2 hours and 18 minutes. I declare this meeting officially closed. Thank you.